What's going on? I'm Scott from Koenig, and welcome to another episode of the Behind the Wheel podcast. We do it on Wednesdays. You've been here before. Jared's with me, and our special guest. I'm going right into it.
Okay.
Going right into it. Listen, special guest, Ryan, I don't want to butcher your last name. I've heard it used about 3 different times. I've called you it by different things. I want you to give me the last name correctly.
Douthit.
Douthit. See?
Yeah,
I would
like
have butchered
South
that.
it, but Douthit.
Douthit.
Or douse it with fire. Douth it.
Yeah, there's only like 5,000 of us in the country, but that's okay. Right. I'm sure most of them are still in, the Carolinas for some reason.
But you represent it well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm one of the rare, I'm like part of the missing link of Douthits, because there was like a whole clan like broke off from the main clan and like wanted nothing to do with it.
Right.
The rest of the clan. And around this last election cycle, I kind of found out why nobody wanted anything to do with the rest of the family. So here I am.
Right. So for those that don't know, Ryan, first off, you have a very successful I don't like using the word successful. I think it's very arbitrary. But for today's terms, successful YouTube channel, Driving Sports TV, where you do really incredible, in-depth reviews of vehicles. And I think that's just kind of saying the least of it. But we'll elaborate as we get going.
It's been a long road to where we are today. That's for sure.
Pun intended.
Speaking of the long road.
Yeah.
Ryan, I've known you for 15, 16 years.
Yeah, I was just looking at some like old videos, kind of putting them in context. And it's been that long. Yeah. It's crazy.
We met through
go ahead.
Ryan was the editor-in-chief of Subi Sports Magazine
way
back in the day. Subi Sports.
Subi Sport.
And
that was a very fast and fun 4 years. That was only 4 years.
It was super. You guys were like, especially with Subi Sport Magazine, it was an interesting time, because if you're a Subaru fan now, you don't quite grasp what the magazine was then. There was a lot of purist base to the magazine then, and that's what I think made it so. Like, it's kind of frozen in time, but in a good way.
Yeah. And I think it's mostly because the magazine came from, I was an enthusiast. I had no money. I started a magazine because one didn't exist.
Right. And
I made the best of it I could for the time that I could, until the whole industry collapsed in 2009. But it was truly enthusiast to enthusiast. It's not like Honda tuning, where you had what was it, Primedia, I think.
Yep.
Boy, it's so long ago now. Where you have this industry saying this is what we define as tuner. Instead, we're just a couple dudes up in the Pacific Northwest going,
right.
This is what I see. This is what I like. And then I really got intrigued by the, I think it was Hot Option. Was that Hot Option? Was it the Japanese DVDs?
Yeah, there was Initial D.
Initial D was like the scripted show, but there was the DVD that these guys were selling in Japan, and it basically created the whole drifting scene.
Yeah.
And I was really intrigued, not by the drifting quite so much, but by the model that they had. Because here they were basically creating their own events and then selling DVDs around those events to kind of help pay for the events.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, hey, I have a Subaru magazine. Let's do that. So I started SubiFest, which still is going on today. I sold it to Robert Champion years ago, and he's done a fantastic job of pushing that and expanding that. He's expanded it well beyond what I had interest in expanding it. I wanted to kind of keep it small and race oriented. And he's like, no, let's make it for the people. And he's done a great job with that.
Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting to see the progression, how you have always remained in media. I think as long as I know you in a professional aspect.
My entire life from high school on, I was the layout editor for my high school newspaper. That's basically where it started. I was doing laying out local car ads. Because I started, before I was the layout editor, I was the ad designer for my high school newspaper.
There you go. So that's an interesting point. Let's walk through it. So you go from, well, listen, I'm not going to ask you to put timestamps on this stuff. I just want you to take us through the order of things somewhat chronologically.
Okay, as defined by my pickled brain. We'll see. So what do you want me to start? That I grew up on a small island in the Pacific Northwest, just off the Canadian border, that had like the hottest car was a 1972 Datsun pickup.
No, I don't want that. I want you to.
Those were sweet little pickups, I will say. Those were pretty awesome.
I agree with you. And if you could find one that isn't a pile of Swiss cheese at this point, they were really known for their meticulous metal selection.
Yeah.
But if you do find one, our channel wants one.
So that would be sweet. Yeah. So my I guess you could say because I didn't grow up in an environment where there were a lot of like hot cars. It was a bunch of hippies who drove Volkswagen Bugs, and I didn't really get a love for cars until I could actually like start driving a car. And I'm gonna hit this. I'm gonna hit you with this, and you have not seen this yet. But if you're watching the video, you can see this.
Oh yeah. Oh, that is sweet.
Look at that, a Honda M600.
What is that? An 81 Honda? How dare you?
No, that's a 78 Civic.
That's 78.
78, okay. Shape of an egg. By 80, was it 81 or 82 where they went to the wedge shape?
Yeah.
That car, it did not go fast, but I drove it to its limit.
Right.
I discovered something called heel toe shifting, which I didn't know was actually a thing. I thought I was just being like
creative,
discovering something on my own. And I'm like, and then later they're like, oh yeah, that's heel toe shifting. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a thing. Great. Whatever. Yeah. But that car, I actually crashed it 5 times. One time I lashed a rope around the front of it and put it in reverse full speed in the apartment complex where I was living, in the garage. They had those poles, and I just lashed and just pulled into reverse. Smart. And then the nose got pulled back out. And I'm like, yeah, another year with this car. The car never died. I ended up selling it to a buddy years later. And it's probably, I like to think that it's still kind of driving around somewhere out there, maybe with a few less body panels than when I had it.
So you go from that area, you said you were the editor or layout editor, right? Mm-hmm. Of your high school newspaper?
Yeah, high school newspaper. Right. So I went to Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, Washington. And at Lake Washington, the journalism teacher was buddies with the superintendent. This is important because we ended up with the highest end journalism department you can imagine in high school. In 90, I graduated in 91, so this is 89, 90. And we had like dual page grayscale monitors. We had scanners. We were using Photoshop and PageMaker. We're using Pro Tools for everything. Wow. The writing staff had a whole like line of Mac Pros that they would write on. So we had the setup, and I was really attracted to that. I'm like, this is where I belong. Right. And that's sitting here right now surrounded by Macs. It's basically the same thing. Although I did go for years in the PC world. So I've kind of played both sides of the coin there.
So then you go from there. Where's your next step? You said you've been in media the whole time. So
yeah, I actually went from high school into junior college. We called it community college back then, but it's junior college now, I guess. Right. Where I studied video. There was a video production class with a TV station, and so I went directly into that and did that for a couple of years, and then just started kind of work career after that. And I didn't follow up on video at that time because, I mean, you're looking at 92, 93. Right. Mm-hmm. And at that time, really, you had 2 paths. You could go to like a new local news organization, or you could move to LA and make movies. That was it. There was nothing in between that you could commercially rely on. And neither of those really appealed to me. I like the creative aspect. I like the technical aspect, but neither of those really appealed to me. Along the time I was working at Egghead Software. You remember that?
Oh yes. My God.
So I was working at Egghead Software, and I got hired from there to a guy who was opening up a new local computer shop. And I'm going to compress time a lot. He hired me just for whatever, because it's such a small organization. They're like, whatever. Immediately, I took over all their ad design layout. We were doing weekly ads, huge multi-page ads. We did photo sessions. We shot video. Eventually, I built them like an e-commerce store in 95.
That's groundbreaking stuff.
It was actually, and he sold that actually for a lot of money, and I didn't see a cent of it, but that's okay. You learn.
Right.
But anyway, so I did a whole bunch of like marketing stuff. We did like national ads. We did all this stuff. The store chain grew from one store to about, I think it was 3 stores plus a big online division. And then the owner sold it. And then I created a media agency basically right after that. And then from the media agency, I started my own publications.
Right.
And not just Subisport. I own Miata Magazine. It's been around for like a decade. I actually bought that later in its life cycle. And then also we spun off Rotary Sport. Nobody was going to remember that one. We did like, we were doing that in partnership with Mazda. So that was really like Mazda was funding it. It wasn't like fan funded like Subisport was.
Right.
And that lasted like, I think 3 issues. And then, and then we did Forever MX5, which was the rebirth of Miata Magazine. And that also was Mazda funded. And the funny thing about like the Miata crowd is they love their Miatas. They're so passionate about their Miatas, but they never buy new ones. They buy one and they love it for the rest of their lives. That does not make a successful business model for Mazda, unfortunately.
Right.
So
I don't disagree with that. There are, we make the joke here at the office quite a bit. We wonder how they're not running out of Miatas. It's incredible because no matter what you do or where you go, you always see the cars. They continue to buy wheels for them, and it just feels like at some point we should have saturated the whole darn market, but not so.
I know it's kind of incredible. The aftermarket is quite good for Miata, but it's not. These aren't people who buy like a ton of expensive things. They buy like add-ons, like wheels, eyelashes, things like that. So they're not going to be like buying turbo kits quite so much. And if they're racing, they're going to be probably spec Miata. So you're going to do a built Sunbeam engine or something like that. You're not going to be, necessarily doing a Home Depot turbo kit necessarily. And I use that term loosely, but like along the whole way, like even when I was in print, I kept going back to video because before I did Subisport, actually, the very first print magazine I did was it was a magazine called Northwest Autosports. I did 1 issue, and I thought, this is really hard. This is really hard. So I'm just going to make it national and put it into all the bookstores instead. As one does. And I'm like, well, Northwest Autosports doesn't make sense as a name. And the URL for Driving Sports was available. So I went with that. And I launched Driving Sports Magazine. And we did 1 year of that. Now, at that time, I was actually a tech publisher for a regional computer distributor. They owned a number of they owned three tech publications. I took over one, and then I launched the others for them. We were so successful, you can see our logo in the Ring movie, which was filmed about that time.
Get out.
Yeah, the tech bug. It actually was Ring 2 because they were filming it in Vancouver and they needed Vancouver to look like Seattle. And they said, we see these tech bug stickers everywhere. We need a roll of those to make Vancouver look like Seattle. We're like, okay. So we sent them a big roll of our promotional stickers and they stickered up the city, which was great.
Huh.
But anyway, so I was doing Driving Sports kind of as a hobby. Like, who does a national magazine as a hobby? But I was I was more interested in that than the tech publications I was doing, because tech pubs, they're good, and I find technology fascinating. But the whole like testing of video cards, where you're testing like one frame faster than another one, and you have the whole testing procedures. We did a ton of that. It can get a little monotonous after a while. You're not actually going anywhere. You're stuck in a lab, basically testing things.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. But yeah, after your 100th video card, you're like, okay, I think whatever. So I was doing the tech pub and the tech pubs and Driving Sports print magazine. And that was in all the Books a Millions, what was it? Barnes and Noble, Borders. You could buy it anywhere. To be honest, not a great magazine. I mean, if I look back on it now, I'm just like, it's fine. It didn't go in depth a lot. It was kind of like surface level stuff and some reviews and stuff. It was fine, but nothing like compelling. Like when 0 to 60 magazine launched, that was a very compelling magazine. And that launched while I was doing it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's the magazine. That's cool. Those guys really knew what they were doing. And they had, of course, the backing to be able to do it. me, I was just like, what's this? What's this? What's this? Squirrel. So basically, it came to the point where I was doing the tech publication and I had a huge disagreement with the owners of the tech pub over the way they were operating internally. And I said, I just can't work here anymore. And they said, fine. So I left. And I went home. I told my wife, I'm like, well, I guess we'll have to make a living with car magazines now because I don't have that tech magazine job anymore. And she was like, oh, how are you going to do that? I'm like, yeah, I have absolutely no idea. So we looked at the next issue, and it was kind of a split. There was a lot of Volkswagen stuff, and there was a lot of Subaru stuff. I've owned a lot of Subarus. I had never owned any Volkswagens, but I did see like the Volkswagen was really popular at that time. I was like, so it's kind of like leaning in that direction because I thought commercially it would work, but I didn't really know much about Volkswagens. So I was like, yeah, maybe that's not going to work. So I took the core cover story, which was the Subaru. It was, I think it was with, who is it? IPD. I think it was one of the IPD cars. And basically made that the cover story for the first issue of Subi Sport. And I relaunched as Subi Sport and history. Right. But I kept driving sports around as the DVD. So we did a launch DVD, which took we launched the publication. We're like, you're going to get this free DVD. And people were like, oh, this is great. And of course, yeah, at the time it was harder to do this stuff. And I didn't have a full working knowledge of how the actual production of all this worked. Right. I didn't even know how I was going to produce the disc. Eventually I bought it like a DVD robotic duplicator because it ended up being cheaper than sending them out to get them done. Yeah. But it took way longer. It took like a year and a half to get these discs out, but we got them out eventually. And that was actually the birth then of Driving Sports as a video series. So that's like 2004, 2003, somewhere around there. And we basically kept Driving Sports as the video brand that whole time. Basically, there was Subi Sport magazine and there was Driving Sports as the video brand, because then Driving Sports could bop between the other magazines. It's kind of like we could put every magazine could promote Driving Sports as, we could do it as a Driving Sports branded thing. And that kind of worked, but it was so funny. Some of these early models we played with, this is before YouTube was even a thing. We played with live streaming because we live streamed in like 2008 from the Susquehannock Trail Pro Rally. Of course, it was right up there with me saying, oh, I did one magazine. Yes, let's launch a national title. It's like, oh, SDPR is coming out. Pastrana is going to come out. That's pretty sweet. Let's go live stream from there. Okay, how do we do that? The technology barely existed. We used version 1 of Wirecast. We had to do a bandwidth agreement with a backbone provider. We had to build our own player on our webpage. It was nuts. And we ended up with about, I think the official number was like 14,000 viewers, which in 2008, insane. And also it was a double-edged sword on that because we paid for bandwidth. It's like if you have 100,000 people watch, you're paying for that 100,000 people's bandwidth. Yeah. And you can die from success at that point. So we were like, let's promote it. Let's not promote it too much. Right. And it did well. And that was really fascinating. We did a whole bunch. So over the years after that, we did a whole bunch of live studio shows. For a while, we were doing regular live. And then eventually, so it was about 2006. I know my years are kind of jumping around. It's kind of this clouded in my head. But it was around like 2006 or something where we had been posting some of our DVD content to Google Video, if anybody remembers that. And we actually had an account rep at Google Video. And he's like, hey, we just bought YouTube. I think you should go to YouTube now. And we're like, okay. And he's like, I'll make it interesting for you. You guys, we'll sign you guys as a production partner. That's a new thing we're doing. Like,
oh, yeah.
Okay. And so he sent me a pile of documentation that was like 50 pages long. And we signed it, and we were signed then as YouTube content creators. And that was in, I want to say 2006. It might have been 2007, but it was pretty early. There were no other dedicated automotive channels there at the time. I believe we were the only ones, but there was YouTube was hardly a thing at that point. Right. If we had a video that did 10,000 views, that was like amazeballs. Right. But it was rev share. It was rev share even then. And, if not many people were watching YouTube, even fewer advertisers were on YouTube. So we actually were real. I mean, I saw the model. I'm like, this is the future. And as with many things that I do, I just kind of tried to figure it out as I went, and hopefully that the money would follow. Yeah, well, it didn't. So we pushed it hard till about 2012. And I was doing other things, whatever, because the magazines were still going till 2009. And then, so we did for another 3 years, we pushed the show stuff really hard. And it was just no money in it, like at all. So, even a video with 100,000 views would net you like $20.
Right.
You just can't live off that. And I even at this point, I had a wife, I had a daughter at this point. It was, you have other things you're thinking about, not just some single dude going, let's throw it all out there and see what happens. I mean, a bit of that, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, you still have to pay for your house. You still have to pay for your mortgage, all this other stuff. So, so I kind of went away from that. I had a whole bunch of commercial people that saw Driving Sports TV, and they're like, we really like what you do. We would like you to do that for us. And so over the years that followed, I ended up doing DP'ing, which is a director of photography for people who don't know. It's basically where you control the shoot, for a show on Motor Trend. I did a Lifetime TV show. It was a documentary. I was the DP for one of the segments, so one unit. It's not like I did the show, but I was involved, and that was interesting. Doing a national show where you like walk in and they're like, "Yeah, this is the DP," and you have a crew of like 30 people for one shoot, and you're like, "Wow, this is different than YouTube." Yeah. Okay. But I did it. They liked it and whatever. And I actually worked with that agency for years on other various weird things. They just like would pick me up and just throw me towards these most random shoots. And you like end up shooting with somebody super famous. And you're like, "Oh, it's you." And they're like, "Oh, who are you?" And it's like that kind of thing. And then also like AutoNation picked them up as a client. I did a bunch of stuff like AMMO NYC. And the best thing about this whole thing is just the people that I met along the way. Like I started shooting for AMMO NYC because he needed somebody to shoot a whole series, Larry, for, geez, I don't even remember. Oh no, actually I met him because I was doing stuff for AutoNation, and AutoNation hired him to do a video on winter car prep or something. So I flew out to Chicago to meet this YouTuber dude who I'd never met before. We're in Chicago in January. You know who comes up with that idea? People who live in Florida.
Yeah, right.
And so we show up. I didn't pack gloves. I mean, I'd never been to Chicago in the winter. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I had no idea it could be that cold. And we're outside, and I'm like, I need an intro outside the shop. And Larry's like, "You're nuts." So I'm just like shaking with the camera. Thank God the lens had stabilization, because there was no way that was going to work otherwise. And I met Larry. So, and I'm now, Larry and I, good friends. So, and he's done fantastic with YouTube. And it was along this way that I started to see people, like friends of mine, doing like really big things on YouTube, like really big things. And I'm like, "Oh, wow. Wait, how much are you making now? Really? Maybe I should do that again." And it's really come around to the point where like, YouTube's not a gold mine at all. You put a ton of work in. You have to have a lot of talented people working with you. But if you are consistent, if you do decent stuff, you will eventually at least make enough to be able to support the infrastructure and make a little extra. And that's kind of where we're at today. And I kind of have this big, like typical me. I'm like, you know what? I would really like my own testing facility, because filming in the mountains is great, but other people are there all the time. And especially now, I cannot go into the mountains without people stopping me in the middle of a shoot going, "You're that Driving Sports guy." And I love it. And I want to talk to them. And that's the problem. I stop and I talk to them, which I love, but you don't get a lot of work done. And so at the end of the day, I'm like, "Oh, I only got half my shot list done." So private testing facility is something we just bought. So, and a lot of people are like, "Yeah, it's a hill in the middle of nowhere." Yes, exactly. That's the point. It's a hill that we can sculpt into exactly what we want. We're not in any hurry. We're not going to and plus I don't have $1 million, so I can't just build exactly what I want. Also, Seattle is in the middle of a massive building boom right now. So to get any contractors is near impossible.
Right.
So some of like the bigger buildings are just going to have to wait, just because even if I did have $1 million, I still couldn't build anything because you just can't hire anybody. All the contractors have gone to like because we have a huge light rail system going in. We have massive buildings and everything. Microsoft has raised its entire campus and is building an entire new campus right now. It's insane.
Yeah. I want to stop you for a second because I don't want to glaze over.
Can't stop me. No, sorry. What?
No, so it's like so I don't want to glaze over this whole thing. So driving sports obviously has gotten to, and if you're not familiar with driving sports, you should go check out the content there. It's entertaining. I think what's for me, and you could tell me if you think I'm completely off base, but I think to me as a viewer, I think what makes the channel so much better than some of the other review channels, quote unquote, is the cinematography. You really do an amazing job between drone work and kind of, getting all the angles and the shots that really give it that other perception and sense like you're there.
Right. And you got to say, I would lie if I would say that I'm not inspired by the original Top Gear. I think everybody who works in this industry was at least, at the very least, inspired by some aspect of the show. And for me, it was always the cinematography. They always did a remarkable job. Now you look at it now and it looks horribly dated, but at the time it was groundbreaking. And I mean, here's a quick clip. You can see these. This is the awful me thinking like, who thought the shots should be so orange? Here, check this out. Like there's, this is me in 2008 doing a Nismo 350.
Yeah, it's a hot summer day.
Yeah, exactly. Why is it always a hot summer day, especially like on Top Gear? It's not warm there. It's the UK. It's never warm. It's never that orange. But anyway, so yeah, that's so that was an inspiration. And of course, because I come from video. I've done video since 2001, and before that, like my grandfather was huge into cameras. My father's a photographer. He actually owns a photography publication out of Albuquerque. So it's kind of just something that's been around me longer than cars have been around me. And so for me, that's a focus. The one thing I wish I could do is, thank you for the compliment on the look of the show, because we do try hard. I kind of wish I could do more, but time is a limitation. When you're producing a 1 week, every week for the last 3 years, we've done at least one 20-minute show. Wow. Lately, we've started doing 2 to 3 a week. We've added more staff. That's helping that. But we're basically increasing, and we're going to try. So we're ramping up for Q4 because Q4 is always a big YouTube, because everybody's sequestered indoors, so numbers just go up. Plus, his advertising revenue is good Q4, and then we're going to try to maintain that into next year. 2 to 3 20-minute episodes a week, which is a lot, but the algorithm likes it, the fans like it. We can stay at the forefront. We can do more like previews and stuff than what we've done in the past.
Right.
I'm not going to go to like a news show format, because that's not what we're about. But if we get early access to a car, like we've done in the past, like the BRZ, we had an early preview of that. That was great numbers wise for us. And it's really fun too, to be able to tell a story about something that's new without just reading off a press release. I don't like that. We did a news series, kind of sub series on the show several years ago, and we got numbers on it, but it just really wasn't. I don't know. It's just not who we are. I'd much rather be out shooting and creating my own content than just repurposing PR, essentially.
Are you at the point with OEs where you have earned the media stripes to be able to get the call? I love how you're laughing already. You know where we're going. But like to get the stripes where you get the call to be one of the media, covering a new release, get the call to get the test drives, or are you still having to bang down some of these relationships doors to get what you want?
So early on, we've been doing the Subaru launches for a really long time, obviously, because of the print magazine. Yeah. So that was an early one. We went to the UK. We've done Isle of Man with them. That's all amazing stuff. And It's one of those things where you talk to guys from like Motor Trend, especially the young guys, because the young guys get sent to everything and with Motor Trend and whatnot. And so like every week they're doing 2 launches and you're like, what's your apartment look like? Do you own an apartment? Like, do you just live in the airport? And they're like, yeah, pretty much just live in the airport. And that's not something I want to do. So it's that balance of trying to like go to these, to get on the invite list, but then not go to every single launch. Now it's really hard right now because of the pandemic for the last year. There's been some huge launches, which have all been delayed until this fall. So like right now, I'm doing a launch a week for, so I'm doing like Lexus and Toyota and Subaru. I do some others here and there. Those are the ones I'm on. Like I get invited to every single thing, and I can choose whether to go or not. And different manufacturers do different types of events. So there's Ford, for example. My history with Ford is I've done their events in the past, and they're good, but they're not designed for content creation. I'm not going to get a car that I can just pull aside for an hour and film it properly. I basically have to be chasing the event that they've planned out. And that's really hard to do from I don't want to come away with something with not enough shots, with not enough thoughts. I don't want to be running through the event. It's great for writers because a writer can then sit down and then recreate what has happened. But from a cinematography perspective, that's extraordinarily difficult when you cannot set up shots. So I don't chase all the manufacturers for that reason. I would much rather actually, it's kind of interesting that I did I think a great example is the Wilderness, the Subaru Outback Wilderness. I've done 3 videos with the Outback Wilderness. We did the preview, which was huge, did great numbers for us. And then we did the full review, did even better numbers. Like, that's awesome. But the one that actually did the best numbers was we got the car from Fleet. We filmed it on our own. We did it versus the 4Runner that we own, the show owns a 4Runner. And that video actually is the one that has produced the absolute best numbers. It's not necessarily about early access, although that can help. It's not about press events, though that can help. But if you have full control over a shoot and you can craft a narrative that is more compelling, then you can end up with a video that is better. And that's kind of what I like. Driving sports is not. A lot of these channels will rush in, get the information, put it out there. Their video will be huge for 3 weeks and then flatline. Our stuff, for the most part, like if you look at what our recent episodes, I think the last 3 episodes have done like 20, 30,000 views each. We have one video that did 200,000 views from like a week ago or 2 weeks ago or something. But if you scroll back through our history and you look like 6 months ago, every video is like 100,000 views or 200 or 300 or 400,000 views. People really use our channel as a more of a buying advice show. Like, it's like if you're interested in a model to buy, not just to look at it because you want to be entertained, but if you're genuinely interested in it, those type of people watch our show and they actually buy cars. And I think our ad revenue on a CPM basis reflects that, because we have a fairly high, we have one of the highest CPMs of other YouTubers that I've talked to. And I can only assume it's because of that. Like, car makers want to advertise on our channel. And I have no idea who they are, of course, because we don't control advertising on YouTube.
They're robots.
Yeah, probably. I don't care. The money hits my account. It's all good. As long as Google's good with it, it's all good.
Yeah.
But so like our videos, basically, the spike is important. You want a video to not suck. You want your viewers to see the video, the work you've created, and you want a lot of people to see the work you've created. But it doesn't really bug me so much anymore if it's not an overnight rock star video. I want it to settle in a nice place so that it just percolates over the years. And I have some videos still today that are doing like 1,000 views a day that we posted 2 years ago. And it's just like, wow, they just keep on churning. And that's the type of content that really builds a channel. And I think a lot of people miss that. Like, I in this industry, I've been really blessed to be able to meet a ton of great people, a lot of other creators. And we talk about like the type of content that we create and how it's doing and that kind of stuff. There's some people who create what they want to create and the fans enjoy that content. There's other people who are constantly chasing the other guy's success. And those guys, for the most part, I don't find to be as successful, because they're always right behind the curve. They're always trying something new, and their channel never really gets an identity. It's like they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this, they're this spaghetti against the wall. I'm doing 500 videos. Well, I do stats. I constantly am running stats versus other shows and also other content types within our category, at least. And it's really interesting to see how some of these guys are doing like 50, 60 videos a month. Like, how do you do that as like a one-person show? But it's insane the amount of work. And I give them credit for the work ethic. But my God, man, work smarter, not harder.
There you go.
And they're and so they do all that. And I produce, in that period of time, I produced like 4 videos, and they've gained 500 subscribers, and I've gained like 6,000 subscribers. And it's like, yeah. So anyway.
But do you think that there's something to that, about that whole pandering to the quote unquote algorithm type thing? I mean, I understand your point, and I my personal opinion sides with you, not because you're successful, whatever, but it sides with you because I believe in content over quantity. You know what I mean?
Quality over quantity.
I've been beaten down by the
content.
I've been beaten down by the algorithm, because the algorithm changes about every 6 months or so.
Yeah.
And usually when there's a shift, you see a massive shift in your views, the way they work, the way that certain content, like it used to be last year, you would have a video that would spike and then it would sit for 5 days and then it might spike again. That second spike is now gone. But I find that the overall dailies are a little bit higher. So, you can't really pander to the algorithm too much. Keywords are important. Like, for example, a BMW 8 Series video we did, thumbnail doesn't matter, title doesn't matter. Nobody wants to watch a video on an 8 Series. They just don't. And I mean, unless you're a BMW channel, in which case,
right.
And the algorithm really does kind of sculpt your channel. If you follow the algorithm, if I follow the algorithm, all I would do would be off-road, comparison, shootout videos. That's all I would do. And because those are hugely successful on our channel. But I still do like the BMW TLX Type S, because I'm interested in that car. Also, you have to understand that car to understand the automaker, to understand their approach to their other vehicles. You can't drive like an MDX and not have driven a TLX.
Yeah.
It's like, because the DNA is very much shared. So even though we're not going to get a lot of views with a TLX video, I'm still going to do that video because I need to understand that video, understand that car better, to understand the manufacturer, to understand the MDX. And if I'm not shooting a video about a car, I'm not going to understand it as well, just because there's a process that goes into the whole creation of a video where we have to do research, we have to shoot it, we have to experience it, we have to do this, we have to do that. Yeah. And basically it just puts me through the whole process. And at the end of that, I might as well produce a video because I've done the whole process anyway.
But it's interesting because with that same note, though, you can really make a claim that while that video, and it's kind of what you're doing, that video may not get the views or whatever it may be, but it continues to provide the authenticity of that DNA to your channel. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. It's the overall
stepping
experience.
Stones, you know?
Yeah. And also, you never know what's going to be popular in 3 years.
Right.
If all of a sudden nobody cares about SUVs and off-roading, then, which is possible. I mean, people kind of go this way, that way. We don't want to be caught flat-footed, not having an understanding of the entire industry as a whole. So we don't do huge shootouts between like the expensive productions. We don't do those with like a TLX because we know we're not going to get a return on that, but we know we'll get a return on a shootout between us, off-road vehicles. So we'll do that. And we've done a few recently. We'll do more once we have the facility, our own personal off-road park done, which actually I think the roads are now done. We've started filming on it. We need to add some buildings though. And I definitely need to get a car charger out there because that's the way things are heading.
So let's talk about this.
Sure.
Because I mean, building your own battlegrounds it's a big, I don't want to say big deal. I mean, yes, it's a big deal. It's a massive undertaking, and also obviously important to your channel for a growth element. But
yeah,
where do you sit, where you sit down? I mean, we know the obviously comparison you gave before. You said, hey, look, I'm getting interrupted more. If this is crucial to me being able to continue to make content efficiently. But where do you sit down, especially, and I know you long enough to know that like you probably at one point said to your wife, so I'm gonna build this like my own racetrack, like not racetrack, but
it's kind of like I
it's
don't
like,
use the term race.
I understand.
Mhm.
I'm gonna build my proving grounds,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna have to buy this property.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to do this.
Yeah, that's pretty much how the conversation went. But you know,
Yeah.
before that, my wife and I my wife and I've been married 25 years. We met in high school. We've
Right.
been together a very long time, and so we kind of understand each other. And we over the years we had talked about investing in property. I mean, because especially in the
Yeah,
Pacific Northwest.
Right. But okay, fair. But we all know that when you said invest in property and when she
I
heard
had a totally
invest in
different
property,
idea.
all
Yes,
right,
this is true.
understood. I'm sorry. Continue.
It's all good. So though there was one thing there was one aspect that was important when I bought a facility was that the property would be appealing to her for a potential corner to be dedicated to a vacation cabin, not a place she ever would want to necessarily live in, but
Yes.
a place where she, you know, she's a writer too. So not two, but you know, she's a writer.
I understand.
And she would like to have a place where she could get away. And she is also an artist. She's a painter. So she would like to be able to have basically a quiet, remote place that would look nice, you know, be visually appealing for her. So that was one thing I had to consider. Like, I didn't even show her any of the other like 100 properties that I looked at online on Zillow and stuff. I'm like, oh, that would be amazing, but it's all brown and flat, and like that's not cool. Right. So basically, I didn't even show her anything until I found the property that we currently own. And buying rural property is weirder than I thought it would be. You know, you can get a loan for anything. You cannot get a loan for rural property. It's like, because there's no well on it, we can add a well, but there's no well currently. And without a well, you can't get a mortgage. So pretty much with no mortgage, you got to pay cash. And so that was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go from the 100 acres, maybe 5 acres. I think we can make 5 acres work.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And the hard part about looking for a well is that you're exactly that, looking for a well. They don't necessarily always strike
no,
water?
And it's 35 it's 35 grand to start looking for a well,
right?
Where we're at. It depends on where you're at, but we're 2,000 feet in the mountains. And to that point, I love, probably my favorite type of video to shoot, and also the most exhausting to shoot, are snow videos. I love snow videos. I wanted property where I would be almost guaranteed snow for 6 months of the year. That's what we got.
Check.
And even better, I have access to the property, because this is also a great thing about rural property. The people around you don't work at Starbucks. The people around you, so one neighbor down the street owns an excavation company. I hired him to do my roads after I got quotes from a bunch of different people. He literally drove the tractors from his house to my place. Like, he's that close.
That's so
and then,
cool.
It's so cool. And he's like, yeah, you need to plow snow? Just give me a call. I'll come down, clear it out for you. And then you can go shoot your videos. I'm like, yes. He also owns a Jeep that's been converted to leaf springs all around. It's crazy. And then my neighbor across the valley owns a well company. So he owns one of the big well companies up north, but he lives in he doesn't live in my valley, but he owns a lot of the hills around my place. So he's like, oh yeah, I did 4 wells with your neighbors. I know exactly where the water is, you know, mostly. He's not going to guarantee it, but he's like, we got this. So it's like the guys who live out there are all like infrastructure people, which is great. And one crazy guy across the way, because there's always one of those.
Yeah.
And I've heard that there are many rattlesnakes out there, though I have yet to see one. Wow. But we did name all our roads after snakes, because there's a lot of snakes out there. I have seen rubber boas, I have seen garters, but I used to play with those as kids. Garters, they were I'd throw them at my brother.
Wow. Yeah, that's the difference between the Pacific Northwest and Northeast. we don't throw snakes.
Yeah, Scott.
You don't throw snakes? Really?
No, we don't throw snakes.
Scott had his trip booked, and now he had to.
Yeah,
cancel.
now I'm gonna have to cancel.
He's like, done.
But so you talk about this infrastructure. I heard you talk about buildings. I mean, what do you look at when you start talking about all this infrastructure? What's your timeline? Do you think it's a continuously building project for the next 10 years? Do you think it's a short
No,
term?
2 years is kind of what I want. The order is the big deal. Like, and these are also things you don't think about when you live in the city, is where do we put the bathroom? And you can't build a bathroom without water, and you can't build water without well. So, so the first thing that I need is I need some building that I can run city electric to for a car charger, because we're going to have a Jeep 4xe out there pretty soon. That's obviously one that you can run electric and not, which is fine. But we're getting very, very close. Like in the next 2-3 years, we're going to start seeing way more all electric. Subaru just announced today their Solterra. They already announced the Solterra, but they've leaked more images today and more information about that, about their all electric, all-wheel drive vehicle. So we're definitely heading in that direction. And you can't just run power to nothing. You have to have some building for them to run it to. So I have to build some structure that they can run that to. That's kind of my first priority. Also, I need a place to put all the shovels and buckets and stuff that we need for modifying the roads, because we have like logs and cutouts and we have to maintain all that. So, and I hate just ferrying all this equipment out every single time I go. So I need to build something. I'll probably put a shed in first, just so I have a place to like get out of the bad weather and to run power to. But long term, we're going to put in a 2-bay garage with lifts, because I want to be able to shoot underbodies of cars. That's actually one thing I really feel like we've been missing for years. And I used to do it years ago. I tried to like partner with local guys, but then there's things not available, or they're not available. And it's like, if you don't control it, it becomes difficult. So we're going to put in basically a garage with 2 lifts. We already have it marked out on the property where that's going to go. Probably a working space, like a cabin thing up in the top part where there's a nice view. And then, and the shed will probably end up becoming a production shed, so we can do live streaming. I can actually, this shocked me. I called AT&T and they're like, yeah, we can get gigabit there. Yeah, no problem. Like, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, yep, that address, we can run gigabit there. It's $600 a month, but you can run it. Like,
wow.
Okay. So I got that on my roadmap. Because really we could, we could like put 6 cameras up, put it to a live switcher. I love live stuff. Like, live is great. I have a whole studio here with like a 4K ATEM, if people know what that is. It's a live production switcher, and I use it for calls like this because I don't like to half-ass things, and this is great. And also it allows me to switch things around like that.
You unfortunately met your match, because we only half-ass things. So we're hoping that with our half-ass and your full ass, we'll have 3/4 ass when we get done with this thing. You know what I mean?
That's great. That's great.
But so give me your, it's a hard question to ask. I hate asking it, but I want to have some. Where do you see your end goal? And when I say end goal, we obviously know that for a guy like you, that end goal may move and shift, and it also may never really have a true ending point. But what is the goal? We've heard people talk about YouTube and its possibility of a finite amount of ad revenue in space, and we obviously know that the more people that get onto this type of thing, either there's going to be a pivot at some point, or there's going to be a reduction in kind of monetary things, which obviously could lead to that whole pivot. But what's the end goal?
Well, I don't see YouTube really going away, and I feel like I'm big enough, because I'm now a mid-size producer. It's fair to say, if you're over 200,000 subscribers, you're a mid-size producer. You're less likely to be left behind. I would, when I had under 100,000 subscribers, constantly I'm like, this could go away tomorrow, because it could. An algorithm switch will kill you. But at 200,000, you kind of become a little bit more mainstream. And I don't think they're going to do anything to shaft that. That said, I have been shafted so many times by so many platforms. We were on Blip. We were on, I can't even, like, not countless platforms. When YouTube first started, we didn't just stick on YouTube. We were on everything. And like, we have 100,000 subscribers on Roku. Did you know that?
No, we did not.
Yeah, we have a Roku channel with 100,000 subscribers. We don't really update that channel. Haven't in a long time, because do you know how much money we make from it?
Not much. Oh, there you go.
We had an ad partner, and then they changed, and then the revenue went to like nothing. And like it's I love to have 100,000 subscribers there, but they're not really engaged, because like YouTube, you put out a video, you get notifications, you at least see stuff. With Roku, you have to visit the channel to even see if there's new content.
Yeah.
So even though there's 100,000 subscribers, that's 100,000 people who have looked at the channel and said, yeah, that's cool, I'll sub. I don't know if any of them ever come back.
Right.
The numbers weren't there. So there's all those type of things that are constantly coming up. And I think there will be more of those in the future. The things I'm really afraid about, though, are like in not a good way, are TikTok and like Snapchat first, but now it's TikTok. These different outlets have become really popular that don't have a working revenue model. Because as much as it's fun to be on those platforms and amass millions of viewers or views, if you can't make it financially work for you to be able to actually like live your life at the same time as producing this stuff, you will never have the dedication to the content outside of influencers, which influencers are good. I have no problem with influencers, but I think you can only take so much of that. And I kind of feel like TikTok's probably there. I know some people in the automotive industry who have dedicated themselves to TikTok pretty good, and they've amassed huge followings. Don't really make any money though. And at the end of the day, you need to make a living. If you're not making a living working full time on a platform, that's not working. That's just not going to work out. So
you could make the argument though that this is the same type of model that Facebook used. You get the eyeballs first, and
don't even get me started on Facebook's revenue model. Oh, geez.
I know that's tough too. But like what they did was, they had the eyeballs, the authenticity, and then they rolled out a monetary plan. Obviously, I don't think there's as many companies that are as capable of doing it like that.
Yeah, you can't make money on Facebook, really. I mean, you can if you have a lot of if you're monetizing it outside of Facebook, like you're using, brand integrations and stuff like that. And we've done brand integrations.
Right.
I don't like them for the most part, because rarely are they actually applicable to a car review. We did one. It's kind of our joke inside. We did one promo last year for Raid Shadow Legends. I put it in a Mercedes video. I was driving up a hill. It started raining. And so I'm like, now let's play Raid Shadow Legends. And I think that's what the game was called. Anyway, they hit us up again this year. And I don't know if we'll do it or not. I might do it ironically, as long as the check clears.
Yeah.
But those type of integrations really put the brakes on a video. You're like, it takes you out of the experience. And that's kind of, a lot of channels are who is it? McFarland. What's that guy's name? Cletus McFarland. His channel is about him doing crazy things.
Yep.
Our channel is not about me. It's about the cars. And so I don't have like a big cult following, but I have people who follow our reviews. Our reviews are what people go for, not for me. They don't go for my co-host, although she definitely has her own growing fan base, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But and that makes our channel a lot different, I think, than a lot of others. Many channels are personality driven. Ours is not. So I think I'm replaceable on the show, which I actually like, because at some point I will replace me, and I would like the show to continue on. Now, whether or not that's my son, my daughter, or if it's somebody else, fine. I mean, my daughter's now 15, my son's 12. They are getting to the age where, like, did you know, in my daughter in high school this year, she just got signed up. She didn't want the class. She may change out of it, but they have a digital marketing and social media. That is a class in high school now in public schools.
Sure.
Last year, my son had copyright law and digital media production
at 12
in junior high. Actually, he had it at 11.
Oh my God.
So, and this is public school. My kids go to public school, not some fancy pants thing.
The only
I think it's great, though.
There's a failure point with when you start teaching very practical based, non necessarily evergreen type courses, is that one, the odds that the instructor that hasn't been hired to come in just to do that exclusively doesn't have any practice at what they're teaching.
That's true.
And the kids may know more. And two, I think when you start teaching content that's going to be shifting based off of technology and evolving situations, by the time they really get to a term where they can use that content, it's almost lost.
But see, that's where you're wrong, because half these kids have their own YouTube and Facebook pages and their own Snapchat.
For sure.
And
yeah, no, I understand.
TikTok.
I
So
get what you mean.
they are using this information immediately, and it's helping them to avoid copyright issues, which is good. Copyright is a huge problem on.
They should teach that class for us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Go back to junior high so you can get a good education on copyright law.
Well, it's interesting because I have actually called Ryan on a separate personal cue. He's and I've had conversations with him about, like, hey, I don't want to do anything wrong. I'm really struggling with everything that's out there of what I can do, what I can't do, how should I lay things out. And it's a very tall task, especially if you're using maybe your favorite YouTube channels as a reference point.
Yeah. And just for anybody who's listening, the general rule is, this is just general rule. There's a lot of nuance here, but the general rule is that basically you cannot use somebody's content without A, permission, and B, you don't necessarily need permission, but you definitely need to be referencing that material as a creative component. So I can't just like take a clip from the movie Thor. I have to be giving editorial reference to my thoughts about the movie Thor, and then I can use it as supporting material for my thoughts about that film. You can't just use Thor going, yes, as your clip, because it's not contextual to what you're discussing.
Right.
As much as we would like to, otherwise I would include that clip of Thor in every review.
Right. Or you'd have to have explicit consent
or
from
explicit
the creator.
Consent. Correct. And that's the funny thing too, is that you have everybody, and it's not just small creators, you have massive creators who are taking advantage of the situation, playing like, oh, I didn't understand. It's like, you didn't really understand. You've been doing this for decades. You really didn't understand. And so I find that really hard to believe. I think that YouTube makes it super easy to kind of do that. And I think people just do it. And because so many do it, that people get a misunderstanding of how copyright law actually 100%. Works. And of course, my experience with copyright law comes from libel in print. Which was a huge issue. Like, you can't say, like, we had some articles that would be submitted and say, like, Subaru in the Subaru magazine, like, Subaru feels this way. And it's like, do they really? I think that's opening us up to libel, and we would reread it. So I don't basically read every argument from like a legal perspective. And you're like, cannot say that, cannot say that, cannot say that. And it doesn't really add to the article to put words into the mouth of a car maker, or to put words in this, or to make up this thing. It doesn't really add to the content because it's not truthful. And I think that's actually, one of the biggest things is to be truthful. And a lot of people use other people's content. Like, I find that my content is typically lifted because the producer is good at writing, they're good at hosting, they don't shoot their own material, and they just see it as a cheap out to make their video look better. And I hate that. Being lazy, that's being lazy, in my opinion. And I don't like people to be successful on being lazy. Work your ass off, earn it, do it yourself.
Case in point.
It's an interesting. It really is interesting. What's that?
I'm just saying. I was saying I was joking about you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yeah. I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, it is a tough atmosphere. I think that going forward, I think that the problem probably will only just get worse. Like, not better. But I mean, I guess to a certain extent, how do you feel when content may be used in a way and then credit is given on screen? You hear people use that a lot. They say
that's not a legal argument. That's not legally okay, and it's not morally okay.
Right.
Because we've had a very large channel with millions and millions of subscribers do that with our content. We put in a copyright claim immediately, no second thoughts. That's not okay. And even though they've done it with 50 other creators in that same video, it's like, that's on those guys. If those guys are okay with it, I don't care. I don't impress my opinions on other people, but they are legally in their right to claim that content. And so we will and do claim that content because we put a lot of work into what we do, and nobody can have it without asking us first. And in some cases, people are fine. And in some cases also, when we do a copyright claim against somebody, they'll be like, I really want to use this clip. I'm like, that's fine. whatever this clip at $500, you can license it from us, and then we won't copyright it. And I think that's just, and it comes from the fact that we actually shoot video for other companies and we license our content to other companies. That is something we do as part of our business model.
Right.
And so you literally are taking food off of our plate. That is what we do. And not everybody does that. I understand. Some people just do it for the lulls, and that's fine. But it's our business model. And you can't, if I'm charging this guy, I can't let this guy just take it. That's not okay.
So now when you put in a copyright strike against a channel, do they respond by taking it down, by taking it out, or is it just always marked on them forever and the video gets demonetized?
Well, don't cut it out. So it depends on the channel and what kind of strike we do. Typically, I don't do a strike immediately, take the video down. I don't do that. That's the harsher version. And I usually don't do that unless I'm really annoyed with somebody, because of like they've copied and pasted the entire video. I just do an immediate strike on that. That's so not okay.
Yeah, that's stealing.
If you're using a clip, usually I'll give a 7-day notice that they need to correct it in 7 days. And in that case, they can use the YouTube editor just to chop it out. So like even like against, I already said it, but Donut, they just chose to chop it out. And that's fine. I'm happy. That's great. I don't willingly want to strike them necessarily, because 3 strikes and you can lose monetization on YouTube, and that's a huge deal. And I don't want to like risk people's livelihood, but I want them to be aware that what they're doing is not okay.
Yeah. From a YouTube standpoint, since we've already gone this far in this type of conversation for people, what happens? Are those 3 strikes that you have for the entire length of the channel?
Life of the channel, yeah.
So 3 strikes in totality, regardless of how you clear them up. Done.
Well, no, because you can withdraw a strike. So if I give somebody a strike and then they beg me not to do that strike, I can choose to withdraw it.
Okay.
But if it's somebody who reposted an entire video and they say, I didn't know, I didn't understand, I'm sorry, that's not a valid excuse.
Right.
If you're reposting entire videos, that's just, that's so not okay. And so like in some cases, that's where people have chosen to license the content. There was another wheel provider that had, wheel manufacturer or reseller, I don't know who they are. They had used a clip of ours and we said, that's not okay. They appealed it with us directly. They're like, we would like to license that content because we really like that content and we really like our video. And so I sent them an invoice and we're all good. And then I withdrew the strike.
Got it. Okay.
So it's doable. So I think from that perspective, you see 3 strikes, you're out. My channel's been around for 15 years. I've never had a single strike. It's not that hard.
Right. Yeah, but it also depends on what kind of situational, how do I say this? What your goal is, right? Like your goal is very business oriented from the content production angle. And you may have other people out there that are doing it for less fun, whatever purposes. But I guess you could make the claim, if they're monetized, there obviously is a monetary motivation there.
Well, even if they're not monetized, it's still, the law is the law.
Yeah.
And if you're not, and the important thing from a business perspective, if you're not enforcing your copyright, you're giving it away. Your copyright does not exist. It's the same thing with patent law. You see people all the time, like pressing against these patents, and you're like, that doesn't really make any sense. But from their attorney's perspective, who granted get paid a lot of money to do that and probably are looking for reasons to work, here nor there. The point is that if you have a patent, you have to enforce it as a business. If you do not, you are basically forfeiting that patent. Same thing with copyright. If you're just giving it away, you no longer have control over that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the Bill Watterson argument. He does not pursue copyright infringement on Calvin and Hobbes because he's basically a loner who said, basically, I've done this. This is great. I'm now not doing that. And I'm not going to pursue anybody. And so you end up with, Calvin peeing on Ford logos on the back of Chevys, and he's not going to enforce it. And that's why you see that, though. You don't see Mickey doing that because Disney will enforce their copyright no matter what. In fact, there was this issue. What was it? Disney was like, for a while, they weren't even allowing like Disney characters on tombstones of children because of copyright infringement. They eventually ceded that and said, okay, if the child loved Mickey this much, we'll go ahead and let them.
Right.
But that was as far as they're willing to go.
Yeah, I would agree that in Disney's sentiment, that's not how you win over the hearts of the
No.
right.
No, definitely not. So yeah.
What's next for you? You have a big year. What's the rest of this year, even in this weird pseudo pandemic, look like for you?
Yeah, I've traveled more in the past year during this pandemic than I have ever. Probably I'm going to hit 100,000 miles on United, which is insane. Just I've been traveling a lot, doing some commercial work, but then also doing show work, and I really would like to with the show ramping up, the show is taking over more and more of my life, although it's always been most of my life. It's like, I still kept a little sliver for other stuff. That other stuff is going to a little bit.
Yeah.
And also I'm adding staff to be able to help with that. So I think the big thing is that we need to get the space developed. We probably need to buy some more cars. That's going to be, obviously we have a huge expense with building the facility, so I'm not buying any new cars right now. I still have we have the 21 Crosstrek, which is a great representation that segment. We have a 4Runner, which is a great representation for that segment. I think we need to look basically where electric's going in the next year, and we need to add either a hybrid or an electric crossover of some sort. I don't know it's going to be the
show cars.
No, we don't do show cars.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say I have a bag Baja for sale. If you
Yeah, I was going to ask about your Baja. Do you still have that? Or are you going to replace it with a Maverick or with or a Santa Fe? I actually had a pre-order. Actually, I did have a pre-order on a Santa Fe. Wait, no, not Santa Fe. What's the Santa Cruz with the Hyundai? I had pre-ordered a Santa Cruz. This is before Ford announced the Maverick, and because I love the idea of a small car-based pickup. I think those are just such a great idea. And I love the Baja. The Baja was one of my first car reviews too. I did a turbo Baja with a 5-speed. Yeah, so it was a manual transmission. I would so love to own one of those today, but no.
I have one for sale.
Bad.
Scott's just over here all quiet.
But I canceled it because I knew that we're gonna have a lot of expenses for the property. So please subscribe, smash that like button, which is always a joke with my kids because my kids watch YouTube. So they're always like, "You're gonna smash the like button?" I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna say that."
So do your kids watch your channel?
No, but the neighbor kids do. So I'll walk out of my house and Elijah across the street, he's this, how old is he now? I think he might, I don't want to insult him if he ever listens to this, but I think he's 6 now.
Yep.
He's like, "Hey, Ryan." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "That car you had with the TVs in the back, it was awesome."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "I have no idea which car you're talking about." And so, but he's so excited about everything, which is great. It's like, and honestly, we try to keep our show clean, not just for that, but so that, we actually do have a lot of families. I get photos. People send photos of the whole family in front of their TV with the TV on the wall watching the show.
How great is that?
Oh, it's so great. It's like, and so we basically, our show is clean for that reason. Profanity doesn't make the show better.
Right.
And also we're not like the bro channel. So,
right.
And also I think that a majority of our viewers are 35 to 45. We actually have we skew older on YouTube than most, probably any other car show, except for Petrolicious, which I'm sure is probably 50 plus. But I'm keeping in mind, I'm almost 50. So that's not really, in my mind, that's not really that old, but so we try to keep it clean. We kind of go for that mid-range demographic, 25 45. That's kind of our range. We don't do the "yo bro." It's not my thing. I can't fake that. I mean, I could fake it, but only for so long, and I would get tired of that. So I don't really put on a persona. I'm not into personas quite so much.
Oh, well, that's good to know. But yeah, I also think it speaks to the type, when you go back to talking about your CPM and the types of videos that do really well.
Yeah,
that is your audience. Those are the people with the income to be able to buy a lot of the vehicles you're reviewing. So
they don't buy a lot of shirts, but they do buy cars. Yeah,
right. So no merch, huh?
We have merch, but we kind of phone it in. It's logo
Yeah.
shirts and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which is kind of funny because historically I'm a designer, so
Right.
I could instead I just buy the blip shift shirts because I really like them, and I like buying a
Nice.
variety of designers. But I mean, I could design this, but yeah, I just don't have the time. It takes time. I mean, people don't realize these shirts, like a design like this is not a 1 hour design, and that's basically what I commit to for merch.
Right.
I'll do logo gear. I should probably actually spend more than 5 minutes on a shirt design. Actually, shirt designs are interesting because like when we launched Subi Sport, I was so busy I didn't want to do a shirt design, so I hired out this dude named Huck G, who went on to do. So he did our Subi Sport logo shirts with a car on them. We had both a Brat, no, it was a Brat for one, and it was a 04 WRX on the other one, STI. And he went on to do Ken Block's stuff. So like the whole block with the crossbones, that was Huck G. And then he's doing like little mini toys and stuff now. So he's done quite well for himself. But I really like guys who are like full-time designers to do shirts, because they can do some really amazing stuff without me having to spend like 3 days on a design.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And so, last question. You talked about.
You sure?
I think so.
Okay.
You talked about owning vehicles for the channel, for the show.
Yeah.
What about OEs? They don't want to give you any vehicles to use for a year?
We get vehicles, like we had a long-term Subaru Outback Onyx XT.
Right.
The reason why not just our channel wants to own more vehicles, but also other channels buy a lot of vehicles, is because you have a lot of limitations on vehicles provided by manufacturers.
Fair.
Any of our test cars, and this actually is a constant issue with our reviews, and there's nothing we can do about it. We do off-road tests with vehicles as they're provided by the manufacturer. We do not put all-terrain tires on them. Would we like to? Absolutely. First off, you have the whole mechanics of owning all-terrain tires for every single make and model of car.
Yes.
Which is just absurd. Buying tires for a review is absurd. Excuse me, based on, again, the revenue model. But more importantly, the car makers absolutely forbid it. You are not allowed to modify the vehicle in any way, shape, or form. Right. They don't even like us to air the tires down if we can avoid it. Very few exceptions, like Jeep will allow us to air the tires down. But for the most part, that's just not allowed. So we have to test the way they are. So if you own a vehicle, not only can you do whatever you want with it, modification-wise, you can put proper tires on it. Like honestly, a 4Runner, a TRD off-road 4Runner like we bought, it comes with the worst tires for off-road. And they're not even great tires for on-road. They're horrible tires. And I was even talking to, I was talking to Toyota about it, and they're like, yeah, we know. They kind of suck. I'm like, yeah, they do. So we put some Falcons on there, and they're great. Not to promote Falcon at all, just honestly, they make a really good all-terrain for mixed use. They're not KO2s, but not everybody needs a KO2. That's a super chunky tire, which we drive down the road. But yeah, you can do things like that with that type of vehicle. And I think that kind of just adds to the experience of what we're doing. I would like to do more overlanding trips. Okay, so this is also something I should touch on, is just because we bought a test test property, does not mean that we're not going to do the adventures anymore. We're not doing a lot of adventures this year right now, just in this little window, because we're just busy with the property, trying to get it up and going. But once we get that, we'll be doing more overland tests, which we've done in the past, and those are always really fun. More like I drove through Death Valley early this year in the 4Runner. That was a great video, continues to do well. Again, it's not one of those videos that like everybody watched immediately, but it just simmers nice. Like just lots of views, lots of comments. A lot of viewers are like, why didn't you air down your tires? I probably should have. Yeah, the off-road guys, they have some thoughts about how you're off-roading. That's for sure. And it's never right.
They're very well outspoken for what you're supposed to do.
Well, and just
and I want to kind of touch on that just briefly, and then we can kind of close this up. But there's off-roading, and then there's being an off-road channel, and we're not really an off-road channel. We're mainstream, like. Our bread and butter and my interest lies in taking stock vehicles and having adventures with them. Stock mainstream crossovers, maybe something a little more extreme, but nothing like built Jeeps. That's that is its own unique audience.
Oh yeah.
Lifted Toyotas with full build outs, that's a different audience. And that, for that reason, you're not going to see me take our 4Runner, jack it up on 3-inch lift, put a tent on the top and all that. I'm just not going to do that, because we're really targeting mainstream regular buyers. And this is something that I experienced too, even with the print. If you go too far, it becomes a very narrow audience, or it's an audience that's not your audience. It's a different audience, they'll watch the Jeep fails at Moab video channel or something like that. Because when you get so extreme that you kind of know everything, you don't want to necessarily hear a review on a Santa Fe going on a small rock trail. But if you want to buy a Santa Fe, you definitely want to see how that'll handle going up a rock trail to a trailhead, because you might do that.
Right.
So that's where we're at. So I always need to draw that line of, is what we're doing too extreme for a mainstream buyer? And I think we've done a pretty good job with that. So but I want to kind of keep it in there. I definitely want to do more adventures though. I want to drive like through Montana. I want to do Utah. I basically want to hit most of the Western states, Eastern states, just because, not because they don't have mountains, sorry, Appalachians, but then also just, logistics.
Well, I mean, listen, I think I would like you to test some of these vehicles through New York City, because I think that what you're underestimating
those streets are awful.
Yeah, what you're underestimating is the off-road capability that you need to drive on-road in New York City.
I've been there. I feel that. And I think I made actually a comment on one of those. I think I was doing a video on some Hyundai, and I was like talking about the Rocky Road, and we're doing this. I'm like, this is great if you're going up a trailhead or driving in New Jersey,
Yeah. Listen, there's some times that you drive in the Bronx and you need to use the winch. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, no, totally there.
Ryan, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us.
Seriously.
I'm imploring all 12 of our viewers to click your subscribe button. So we'll see how that works
Smash that
out.
like button, hit subscribe, ring the bell.
If you see a very, very gentle spike of about 12 people, that's from us.
Well, thank you for that. I thank all the 12 viewers who will now subscribe to the channel. That's much appreciated. Although you'll most likely you'll get is 50% of them, so we'll probably see 6. But I will appreciate those 6 and cover them. Thank you.
We're gonna have to figure out an incentive to get all 12 of them to click the button. It's just clicking a button. You think they could click it, right?
How hard is it?
How hard is it? Thank you, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. I mean, who knows when
absolutely. The next I'll come back again when we get the building in, and I'll talk about how sweet our lifts are.
You know what? I'll come out there. We'll put the cars up in the lift.
Great. We'll put some of your wheels on some of the cars and try not to scratch them.
I love it. Let's do that.
There you go.
Okay.
All right, Ryan. Thanks.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
So that's it, man. I think it's incredible. Like I said, we've talked about this so many times about the different things that we get to do, with the relationships that we have. And, much like Ryan said, how his channel's not about him.
Right.
It's about the content, it's about the cars.
Same with us.
The stuff that we're doing is really, it's not about us. It's about the relationships. It's about being able to offer different opinions and show some of those relationships. We've had plenty of influencers on our podcast. We've had plenty of influencers in our different content, right? And I think it's always good to hear some of the unique angles that each one of those creators, and even though like Ryan said, he's not trying to be the personality, but he is a creator, undoubtedly. It's interesting to see how their opinions differ all the way around, and how they view what they're doing, and different things like that. So I thought it was a great conversation, and for some of you that are listening, I think it's going to be an interesting point of view for you to comprehend and kind of absorb.
Yeah, I mean, especially as someone who's building his own YouTube channel, I mean, I learned a ton of stuff. So, I thought it was great.
I know.
Stayed for the proving grounds, was initially in for or vice versa. I'm totally butchering this.
No, you're killing it.
Literally.
You're killing it. Well,
came for the proving grounds.
Just
stayed for the YouTube.
Perfect.
Info.
Well, so make sure that you can also check out Jared's channel, where he does the off-roading in New York City,
with extremely low cars.
It's a whole other thing. Anyhow, that's it for this time. We'll make sure that we do this again next Wednesday, again, 3 p.m. Eastern. We come back to you. We do this whole thing. If you're not subscribed, well, it's a good time. If you made it this far, let's be honest, you're subscribed.
Gently press the button. Don't smash it. Gently press the button.
Anyhow, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week.